It's a beautiful Monday today. Good afternoon. Hi, and welcome back to the 10 Commandments of Leadership. I am your host, Tim Alston. I'm a leadership strategist. I'm a four-time Amazon best-selling author, and I am a recovering egoholic. The purpose of the 10 Commandments of Leadership are twofold. Number one, we seek to educate, to equip, and to empower emerging leaders with God-thought leadership. And we want to present current events and newsmakers in the light of best practices from the Bible. Today is no different. Today's episode is entitled Coach Prime, and Coach Prime's Classroom Rules. Coach Prime and his classroom rules. Do you realize the fact that Deion Sanders, Coach Prime as we call him, has already chalked up 2 wins and no losses, even before the college football season has begun, which will be on this Friday, August 29th. He's chalked up 2 victories. Number one, he had successful recovery from the removal of his bladder through surgery, which we featured on our podcast on Monday, July 29th. And number 2, his off the football field policy of molding not just football players, but creating disciplined student athletes. What were Coach Prime's main points to his players on last Thursday, August 21st? Number 1, there was the dress code rule. No slides, no hoodies, no headphones, and no sitting in the back of the classroom. Why? Because this signals laziness and disengagement. It signals laziness and disengagement. You see, Coach Sanders is building respect for both teachers and the classroom. In terms of the online learning standards, even in the virtual classroom, players must present themselves with dignity. No wife beaters, no shirts that could cause distractions, and no wandering around shirtless. Once again, Coach Prime is teaching professionalism in every context. In a sense, Coach Prime is simply reinforcing my orders to my students from 30 years ago. And my orders to my students were to slap your teacher. Yeah. I told my students to slap their teacher. And I spoke to a group on this past Friday. We have a group of young men here at Oakwood University here in Huntsville, Alabama. And they're a group of us called Aunties and Uncles. And we are a self-styled voluntary mentoring group to check on these young men, to keep them in line so that they will become graduates and fulfill dreams that they and their parents have for them. So I told these young men, I talked about the Deion Sanders, Coach Prime experience with his football players just the day before. And I said to them, let me give you some instructions. I said, you have my permission, our permission to slap your teachers. They looked at me almost stunned like, whoa, what's up with this? I said, you have permission to slap your teachers. I said, now let me ask you a very simple question. How do you spell slap? They said, S-L-A-P. I said, that's the problem. You're spelling it wrong. S-L-A-P is an acronym for S, sit in the front of the classroom. L, lean forward to get all the instructions. And then I paused about leaning forward. I said, what's going to happen if you're at a college, particularly at an HBCU, historically black college or university? Most of your teachers in the quantitative sciences, in the pure and applied sciences, are going to be coming from other countries and other cultures. Hence, they will have some very strong foreign accents. And some of you are going to want to drop the class, like, no, I can't handle this. No. You need to take the class. You need to move from what I talk about in my Eagleholism Recovery, move from those bitter lemons into better lemonade. And I taught them a strategy that we used when I was assistant director of freshman studies at Hampton University back in the 90s. I said, first of all, you have studied your work the night before. You just don't come into class cold. And the reason you don't come into class, I'll touch on that later, is you come into class, you've read through. You understand what the teacher's talking about because you've read. You're not just asking random questions. And when a teacher uses a word that you don't understand, like if you're in a math class, integers, and they say integer, what you do is you listen to see if that word matches something that you read in your classroom, in your book. If you did not understand how that word, what that word was, you then politely ask the teacher to repeat that word. When the teacher repeats the word and you still don't understand it, then your next strategy is ask teacher, would you kindly write that word on the board for me? Trust me, when you ask that question of the teacher, you're asking that question for really the whole of the rest of the class. When the teacher writes down that information, I don't have my sheet with me, writes down that word on the left-hand side of your sheet. If you're dealing with lined paper, you have a little space there where you need to create a glossary of terms. A glossary of terms, because you can rest assured the word integer, you're going to hear it and see it again and again throughout the whole of that 16-week semester. So if you're already familiar with that word and how it is pronounced, you don't run away from it. You grab it and embrace it. So once again, you sit in the front, S, slap the teacher. S, sit in front. L, lean forward. Get those words right off of that teacher's tonsils. Okay? SLA, ask questions. Ask questions. We are empowered by when we ask questions and we become mobilized. Ask questions. And you ask questions, not just random questions just to fill up the air with a bunch of nonsense. Ask questions based upon the lecture and based upon what you read in your textbook or in your workbook or in your documents for the class. You asked, and the teachers are more than happy to answer questions for you. Why? Because SLAP, prepare you prepare daily. And the other P, which is real important, understand me now, believe it or not, and this may come as a shock to you. Professors are human beings too. Professors are human beings too. What do I mean by that? These people who are your instructor, whether they're an adjunct instructor, associate professor, assistant professor, full professor, substitute teacher, they have spent time, years, studying, preparing to bring a message and a lesson to you. When you don't show up for class, that is a slap in the face to their years of preparation. You're showing I don't have any respect for you. That's why I also say to my students, the importance of attending class. And the big point about that, I sound like I'm getting off the subject. Trust me, I'm not. The big point about that is to arrive on time for class is to arrive late. To arrive on time is to arrive late. Early arrival gets you early information, not just in the classroom, but also on your job. You get there early, you see things, you begin to notice things that are being put together. You may help the teacher with their books or pass out papers or erase the chalkboards or the whiteboards, whatever the case may be. Early arrival gets you early information, okay? Prepare daily. So once again, slap your teachers. S, sit in front. L, lean forward. Listen actively. A, ask questions. P, prepare daily. And P, professors are humans too. Okay? Now, what Coach Prime did and what I did 30 years ago, they are both somewhat similar approaches. Coach Prime's and mine, both approaches, they honor learning, they honor discipline, and they honor respect. What Coach Prime is also saying to his players, and this is real important, hear me now, think and plan beyond your dream of the NFL, the National Football League. You got to know the facts. Fewer than 2% of all collegiate football players will make it to the NFL. Fewer than 2%. And the average NFL career is only 3.3 or 3.5 or 3.5 years long. What happens to so many that will make it to the NFL is that after those 2 or 3 years are over, and they've spent basically all of their young life preparing for that, they don't have a plan for their second act. They've not invested anything more than their physicality. They've not invested in anything more in their learning. Some of them are wise and will go back to school and finish up that degree. Some of them will begin to take that money, have saved it, invested it, and start a business. But it is important to get ready. And this is what Coach Prime is doing with these young men, the Colorado Buffaloes. What he's doing is getting them ready for life beyond playing football. When the cleats get hung up, when the shoulder pads get hung up, what will you do? That's what he's talking about in terms of the classroom. That's why I say, before that first whistle blows on Friday, August 29th, Coach Prime is already 2-0. He's already 2 wins and no losses. And let me get personal. Let me take it a step further. I resonate intimately with what Coach Prime and his playbook. In 1991, Hampton University, which at that time was the nation's largest private HBCU, historically black college or university, hired me and created the position for me as the position as the assistant director of freshman studies. I was there to secure, to retain, and to elevate emerging leaders, first-time freshmen, and transfer students. The mandate of Hampton to me was to help them to integrate successfully, to recover when struggling, and to achieve their ultimate goal, which is graduation. Our approach, our whole freshman studies team, led by my boss, who became my mentor and my love to this day, Mrs. Amanda Murray. Our team applied a leadership framework that mirrors corporate talent development. Number one, we had, I guess what you call in the corporate world, onboarding and cultural alignment. I, for example, coordinated a year-long new student orientation program. What we did was essentially, typically when you talk about a new student orientation, or it used to be called freshman orientation, but we no longer call it that because you've got students who transfer in and who are not freshmen. They've got sometimes 16, 20 hours of college credits already. So it's called new student orientation. Oftentimes it's just like a week of activities. We learned from our research that if we make orientation a year-long process, keep our hands on them for a year with programs and activities, that they're going to be successful. So in the first semester, we had a course called University 101, The Individual in Life, as we began to very deliberately teach them some things outside of the classroom, such as how to study, how to manage your time. What are some of the other issues that could come up, like addictions and drugs and stress and things of that sort, the history of the university, the history of our art collection, those kinds of things that help to round out the individual. So our job was to create that, ensure a seamless adaptation, similar to that of corporate onboarding. We designed strategic messaging to embed institutional values, much like how companies instill culture among their new hires. That's what we did. It was very identical to what happens in the corporate world. Also, we had what we call performance recovery and retention. I, for example, was put in charge of managing the academic probation program when a student slipped below that 2.0 average out of a 4-point system. And our job was to guide them back to the good standing they came to college with, closely akin to corporate performance improvement plans. Here we taught, we advised, and we mentored over those 7 years that I was there, some 9,200 students using coaching techniques that drove engagement and retention. Also, very clearly, we worked in the areas of leadership development and advancement. I, once again, I co-chaired the university's task force on institutional culture and values and helped to co-author Hampton's first code of conduct. And I also served as an adjunct instructor teaching freshman composition. Once again, sharpening leadership communication skills with our students, which is very critical to corporate America. But one of the big things that we taught our students, I think, is that college is adulthood 101. It is not 13th grade. College is adulthood 101. It is not 13th grade. And what were our results? Well, we were blessed. For those 7 years that I was there, we in our Office of Freshman Studies, our team achieved a nationally recognized 90 to 92% freshman to sophomore retention rate, demonstrating high engagement, mirroring top corporate retention strategies. More specifically, we became, during those years, the #1 producer of Black undergraduate degrees holders in the U.S., proving a strong leadership pipeline. We also became the #1 producer of Black English majors graduating, emphasizing the power of communication and leadership. So in this case, much like the case with Coach Deion Sanders and his players, Coach Prime, what were the key takeaways for the organization? Our proven approach to securing, retaining, and advancing talent now helps companies develop emerging leaders, boosting engagement, productivity, and long-term success. It was a wonderful, wonderful experience. It was a great experience. And that's why when I first read about Coach Prime and his program for his players, no hoodies, no slides, no headphones, and no sitting in the back of the classroom. It was nostalgic for me. It sent me back because I knew that when we enforced those same kinds of policies at Hampton University, which was my alma mater, those same kind of policies, we helped to grow young leaders. We helped them help freshmen become sophomores, and we helped them to grow. And it was a wonderful, wonderful working experience for us, and hopefully working great experience for them as well. Well, I hope that this current event story from Coach Prime and his winning record before they even play the first football game will serve as a lesson to you in terms of what needs to be our expectations of our young men and our young women as they fulfill families' dreams, communities' dreams of becoming that college graduate. Maybe the first in their family, maybe the first in their neighborhood, maybe the first in their class. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Please join us tomorrow for another episode of the 10 Commandments of Leadership. And if you have been inspired, if you have enjoyed, if you've liked what has been said, please like, share, and subscribe. And we'll see you tomorrow for the next episode, for the Tuesday episode of the 10 Commandments of Leadership.